right, so get ready because today we are going deep, deep into some pretty interesting stuff. We're talking My Big Toe, this trilogy by Thomas Campbell. TOE, by the way, stands for Theory of Everything, which is kind of a bold claim, don't you think?
It's ambitious, that's for sure. But
Yeah.
Campbell really tries to back it up. He builds this model, this framework really, that tries to bring together all these seemingly disparate areas like science and philosophy and even personal experience.
Yeah, we've got the whole trilogy right here in front of us, Awakening, Discovery, and Inner Workings. And just glancing through the table of contents, we're going to be tackling some pretty big questions. Out-of-body experiences, non-physical matter, reality, the nature of consciousness. Even some of the chapter titles are pretty out there, like, geez Louise, will that fat rat ever find the cheese? What's that all about?
Well, Campbell has a pretty unique way of presenting these complex ideas. He uses humor, anecdotes, even personal stories to make it all more relatable.
So it's not just some dry academic treatise.
Not at all. He really wants to engage the reader, to take them on a journey.
And he starts that journey in Book One, Awakening, by taking us back to his own background as a physicist, deeply rooted in the scientific worldview.
Right, and then he stumbles upon transcendental meditation, or TM.
And this isn't just him, like, trying out meditation for relaxation or stress relief.
No, he describes these profound experiences, especially when it comes to problem solving.
It's actually what leads him to question the limits of, that strictly objective cause and effect view of reality that's so central to science.
It's like TM cracked open a whole new way of seeing the world for him.
It's interesting how these experiences with TM really challenged his core beliefs as a scientist.
There's this great anecdote in the book about his boss's reaction to the concept of out-of-body experiences.
Okay, so we're talking about a hard-nosed engineer, someone who deals with concrete facts and figures, seriously considering the possibility of consciousness leaving the body.
It's like a perfect example of how Campbell's work pushes us to expand our understanding of what's possible.
So, for those of us who are new to this, what exactly are we talking about when we say out-of-body experience?
It's a state of consciousness where someone perceives themselves as being outside of their physical body. They might see their body from above or even travel to different locations.
Wait, so he's saying our consciousness isn't limited to our physical bodies?
That's one of the central premises of his work. And it's what eventually leads him to the concept of the belief trap.
Okay, the belief trap.
He argues that holding onto beliefs too tightly, even seemingly logical ones, can prevent us from seeing the bigger picture.
So he's not saying that all beliefs are bad.
No, it's more about being aware of how our beliefs shape our perceptions and being willing to question them.
Especially when they no longer serve us.
Exactly.
Okay, so he's challenging us to really examine our assumptions about reality.
And to consider the possibility that there's more to life than what we can see and measure.
That's a pretty radical departure from the traditional scientific worldview.
It is, but Campbell manages to bridge that gap by drawing on his own scientific background while also exploring these more mystical, experiential aspects of reality.
So how does he actually reconcile those two seemingly opposing perspectives?
That's where Book 2, Discovery, comes in. He delves deeper into the nature of consciousness, exploring how it interacts with what he calls PMR, or physical matter reality.
And he doesn't shy away from the big questions, does he?
Not at all.
I mean, chapter titles like, does the big dude have an attitude, do we, and what does love have to do with consciousness?
He's really piquing our curiosity.
So if Book 1 is about questioning our assumptions and Book 2 is about exploring consciousness, what about Book 3, Inner Workings?
That's where Campbell really lays out his model of reality, one that includes both physical and non-physical aspects.
All right, now we're getting into the really mind-bending stuff.
He talks about probable realities,
Yeah.
suggesting that our choices influence which reality we experience.
Hold on, are we talking about parallel universes here?
He even touches on things like time travel and teleportation, suggesting that they might not be as far-fetched as we think.
Okay, time travel and teleportation. Now you're really pushing the limits of my imagination.
But Campbell always tries to ground these ideas in a logical framework, drawing on his understanding of physics and consciousness.
So he's not just throwing out wild theories.
No, he's attempting to build a comprehensive model that can account for both the observable and the unobservable.
That's a tall order. But even just dipping our toes into My Big Toe is already making me question everything I thought I knew about reality.
That's the power of Campbell's work. It challenges us to expand our awareness, to consider new possibilities, and to embrace the mystery of existence.
So before we go any further, I want to ask you, the listener, a question. Have you ever experienced anything that challenged your understanding of reality? Maybe a vivid dream, a strange coincidence, or a deep intuitive feeling that you couldn't explain?
I think we all have those moments where we glimpse something beyond the everyday, something that hints at a larger reality.
And My Big Toe encourages us to embrace those experiences, to explore them with an open mind. Because maybe, just maybe, there's more to life than meets the eye.
Much more.
All right, so we've laid the groundwork, introduced the basic premises of My Big Toe. Now let's delve deeper into some of the specific concepts that Campbell explores. One of the most intriguing aspects of Book One, Awakening, is his personal experience with out-of-body exploration and how it shaped his understanding of consciousness.
His interactions with Bob Monroe, a pioneer in consciousness research, are particularly
Oh
fascinating.
yeah, I read about those, like the time they were experimenting with out-of-body travel and ended up, well, let's just say they ended up somewhere that was definitely not Kansas anymore. But before we get into those stories, I think it's important to define what Campbell actually means by non-physical matter reality, or NPMR.
He describes it as a dimension of reality beyond our everyday physical experience, a realm of consciousness where the laws of physics as we understand them don't necessarily apply.
So if PMR is the physical world we experience with our senses, NPMR is like a deeper underlying reality.
Exactly. And he claims to have explored it firsthand, documenting his experiences in meticulous detail.
He even shares a story about using his knowledge of NPMR to connect with his son on a non-physical level.
It's a pretty amazing story.
Wow, imagine being able to connect with your loved ones beyond the limitations of physical distance. It really makes you wonder what's truly possible.
That's what makes My Big Toei so compelling. It pushes the boundaries of what we think we know about reality and opens up a world of possibilities.
All right, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's bring it back to some of the foundational concepts in Book One. We talked about the belief trap, but there's another crucial idea that Campbell introduces early on, the limitations of objective causality.
He's essentially arguing that limiting ourselves to a purely objective cause and effect view of reality prevents us from understanding the true nature of consciousness.
So instead of our brains creating consciousness, he's saying that consciousness might be the source of everything, including our physical world.
That's a core principle of his theory of everything. Consciousness is primary, and the physical world is a manifestation of consciousness.
That's a pretty mind-blowing concept.
It challenges our entire understanding of reality.
So our thoughts, our intentions, our choices, they all have the power to shape our experience.
That's a key takeaway from Campbell's work.
It's empowering and a little bit terrifying.
It is a lot to take in.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground here exploring the foundational concepts of Book One, Awakening. We've talked about the belief trap, the limitations of objective causality, Campbell's experiences with TM and out-of-body exploration, and his introduction to the concept of non-physical matter reality.
And we've only just scratched the surface.
Exactly. In the next part of our deep dive, we'll delve deeper into Campbell's model of reality, his theories about consciousness, and the implications of his work for understanding ourselves and the universe.
It's going to be a wild ride.
So buckle up and stay tuned. Okay, so last time we left off talking about this idea of non-physical matter reality. NPMR Campbell describes it as like this realm of pure consciousness where, the laws of physics as we know them don't really apply. It's a pretty out there concept, I have to admit.
It definitely stretches the limits of our imagination.
So give us like the, I don't know, the elevator pitch. What exactly is NPMR and how does it relate to our everyday experience?
Well, Campbell uses this analogy of a computer simulation.
Yeah.
Think of our physical world, what he calls PMR, as like the virtual reality that's rendered on the computer screen. NPR would be like the underlying code, the data that generates that simulation.
Okay, so our physical world is like a projection of this deeper non-physical reality.
Yeah, that's one way to think about it.
But if that's the case, does that mean that our world isn't real? Like, does anything even matter?
Campbell addresses that question directly in the book. He says that the term real is relative. From our perspective, here in PMR, the physical world is definitely real. We experience it with our senses. We interact with it.
It has consequences.
Exactly. But from the perspective of NPMR, PMR might be seen as more of a training ground, a learning environment for our consciousness.
So it's like we're playing a giant virtual reality game,
A way, yeah.
but with real consequences.
Well, the consequences are real within the context of the game.
I see. So where does this whole idea of the fundamental process fit into all of this?
The fundamental process is like the driving force behind everything in Campbell's model.
Yeah.
It's this constant cycle of growth, exploration, feedback, and then more growth.
And he's saying that this process applies to everything in the universe.
From subatomic particles to galaxies to consciousness itself.
Okay, so it's not just about things falling apart, like in the concept of entropy.
Right. It's also about new patterns emerging, new structures forming.
So it's like this dance between order and chaos, creation and destruction.
Exactly. And consciousness is right at the heart of it all.
Now, we touched on this idea of psi phenomena earlier, things like telepathy, precognition, clairvoyance. How does Campbell explain those abilities?
He suggests that they might be examples of consciousness interacting with reality in ways that we don't yet fully understand. As consciousness evolves, it becomes more complex and more capable of influencing its environment.
So these abilities that we consider paranormal might actually be just latent potentials within all of us.
That's a possibility that Campbell explores.
It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it. Now, Campbell also talks a lot about love in his book. What role does love play in all of this?
He describes love as the fundamental energy of consciousness. It's the force that drives us to connect, to create, to grow.
So it's not just some fluffy, sentimental feeling.
No, it's a powerful force that shapes reality.
That's a beautiful concept. Okay, let's talk about another big idea from my big Toei, the idea of probable realities. What exactly are we talking about here?
Imagine all possible realities existing simultaneously as probabilities. It's like this vast library of potential outcomes, all the different paths that could be taken.
Instead of there being one fixed future, there are countless possibilities.
That's the idea. And our choices, our intentions, our actions, they influence which of those probable realities we experience.
So if I want to experience a different reality, say one where I'm happier, healthier, more successful, I need to shift my intentions and choices.
It's not quite as simple as that, but the idea is that by becoming more conscious of our choices, we can start to influence which reality we experience.
Now, how do we actually do that?
Campbell suggests that practices like meditation and mindfulness can help us quiet the mind and connect with our deeper selves. From that space of stillness and awareness, we can start to make more conscious choices that are aligned with the reality we want to experience.
So it's like we need to tune into the right frequency.
You could say that.
It's a pretty radical concept. It's like we're all participating in this giant cosmic choose-your-own-adventure game.
It's a powerful metaphor.
Okay, so we've got NPMR, the fundamental process, probable realities. It's a lot to take in.
And we haven't even touched on everything yet.
I know, my brain is already starting to hurt.
But it's a good kind of hurt.
Hopefully. All right, so in the final part of our deep dive, we're going to explore the practical applications of all this. How can we actually use these concepts to improve our lives and make a difference in the world?
That's the question we'll be exploring.
Stay tuned. Okay, so we've made it to the final part of our deep dive into my big Toei. And I gotta say, my head is spinning with all these mind-bending concepts, probable realities, the fundamental process, NPMR. But now I'm really curious about the practical side of things. How do we actually apply these ideas to our lives?
Well, that's the whole point of Campbell's work. He doesn't want us to just get lost in the theory.
Yeah.
He wants us to use these concepts to transform our lives and the world around us.
So it's not just about understanding these ideas intellectually, it's about putting them into action.
Exactly.
Okay, so where do we start?
Campbell emphasizes the importance of self-awareness. He talks about raising our quality of being.
What does that mean?
It means becoming more conscious of our thoughts, our emotions, our beliefs, our motivations.
So basically understanding ourselves better.
Right. Because he argues that most of our suffering comes from our ego.
That part of us that's driven by fear and desire.
And a sense of separation from the rest of reality.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do we actually become more self-aware?
Campbell suggests practices like meditation and mindfulness.
Okay, so I've tried meditation before, but I'm not gonna lie, I have a hard time quieting my mind. It's like there's this constant chatter going on up there.
It takes practice. But even a few minutes a day can make a difference. Just focus on your breath or a simple mantra. And when your mind wanders, gently guide it back.
Okay, I'm willing to give it another shot. What about mindfulness?
Mindfulness is about bringing your attention to the present moment, noticing your thoughts, your feelings, your sensations, without judgment.
So it's like really being present in the here and now.
Exactly.
I like that. It's about appreciating the little things, like the taste of your coffee or the feeling of the sun on your skin.
Those everyday moments that we often take for granted.
Okay, so self-awareness, meditation, mindfulness. What else does Campbell recommend?
He also talks a lot about the power of intention.
So if we want to change our lives, we need to start by changing our intentions.
It's about cultivating a deep desire to grow, to evolve, to align ourselves with the fundamental process.
But it's not just about setting goals, right?
No, it's about something much deeper. It's about asking ourselves, what kind of person do I want to be? What kind of world do I want to create?
And then making choices that reflect those aspirations.
Exactly.
That's powerful. So it's not just about what we want to achieve, it's about who we want to become.
It's about aligning our actions with our values.
Now, earlier we talked about lowering our entropy, getting rid of that mental and emotional clutter that weighs us down. How do we actually do that?
Well, meditation and mindfulness can help,
Mhm.
but it's also about identifying the things that are draining our energy, the limiting beliefs, the negative emotions, the unhealthy
And
habits.
then making a conscious effort to let go of them.
This process.
But a worthwhile one, I imagine. One thing I've been wrestling with is this idea of personal responsibility. On the one hand, I love this idea that we have the power to shape our own reality. But on the other hand, sometimes it's hard not to feel like we're just victims of circumstance.
Campbell acknowledges that there are circumstances beyond our control, that we all face challenges and setbacks.
But he also emphasizes that even in those difficult situations, we still have a choice.
A choice in how we respond.
So it's not about denying the reality of those challenges. It's about recognizing that we still have agency.
We can choose to react with anger and resentment, or we can choose to respond with compassion and resilience.
It's a subtle shift, but it can make all the difference.
It can.
Now, Campbell also talks about the importance of finding our purpose, our unique contribution to the world.
He says that when we align ourselves with our purpose, our lives become more meaningful.
So how do we find that purpose?
It's often revealed through our passions, our interests, the things that light us up.
So pay attention to what brings you joy.
And then find ways to express those passions in service to something larger than yourself.
That's beautiful. It's like we're all pieces of a giant puzzle, and when we find our place, everything starts to make sense.
It's about finding our unique contribution to the whole.
Wow, we've covered so much ground in our deep dive into My Big Toey. It's been a truly mind-expanding experience.
It has.
For anyone listening who's intrigued by these ideas, I highly recommend checking out the book. And Campbell also has a ton of resources available online, like lectures and videos.
There's a whole community of people exploring these ideas.
So if you're ready to take the red pill and dive down the rabbit hole, My Big Toey is a great place to start. You might just discover that reality is a lot more amazing and a lot more malleable than you ever imagine.
It's a journey worth taking.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep those